we'll bring it back to the commission. Discussion by the commission.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll start it off. Last March, we heard a lot of testimony, and again, today we heard a lot of testimony regarding this issue. And I've done a lot of study and research and contemplating, and I've had a tough time coming to grips with the differences between the urban coyote and the rural coyote. The perception from our urban citizens seems to be different than the rural. And I'm going to find it difficult to try and regulate the coyote calling contest from the point of view that this state regulates cell phone use on highways, and yet we see it every day. But I don't know, and this is one of my comments back in March, that I don't know how you can regulate what the petition is asking for. So I don't know that I can, again, support the petition.
Okay. Commissioner Valentine. Additional commission discussion?
If you may, do you want, is it okay?
Commissioner Hubbs, yep, absolutely, go ahead.
I some capacities just want to get this over with because it's such a contentious issue right now. You can just feel it in the room. But I did want to mention that this past month, I did receive a lot of communication as I am a commissioner for the general public. And I'd have to say the majority of my communication was very much in positive support of the petition, and with very few communications coming my way opposing it, which may have been very different for some of my fellow commissioners, I'm assuming. But I think as the commissioner for the general public, my biggest issue is a little bit in terms of the breadth of the petition. I do think it's very broad, and I would like to talk more about that today. But I think as a commissioner protecting the public trust, we have a duty to be very prudent and make sure we're making the best decisions. And I would like to err on the side of caution and support it moving forward in order to get public dialogue moving forward. I think that I have heard the pros and cons. I think it's supported by adequate scientific studies. And I think as a regulatory body, we might be able to come up with something that might be functional over time.
Thank you, Commissioner Hubbs. Additional commission comment? Commissioner Bliss?
Thank you, Chairman Drew. I did take the time to reach out to an individual that puts on these calling contests. And I asked him questions of why, who, what, where, when type questions. And I said, what makes you decide to have a competition and where? And he said, well, with all the recent sage-grouse issues that we have, our mule deer, fawn recruitment issues that we've had, he said, I've tried to focus our competition around sage-grouse leks, around fawning grounds, and during the time of year that it would be most beneficial to those species. And I asked him about the money that was generated during this competition and what they did with it. He told me that they took the money that was generated and they went in and they helped rebuild 3 big game guzzlers. They they added additional tanks to these locations. They purchased all the piping and so on, and it was all done volunteer labor, man hours. They also are going to use some of the money that was generated to try to do spring development and put this money back into the resource, into the wildlife. So I do agree that the right time, the right place for the right reason, that they're beneficial. I wouldn't agree with one being done, in a manner that wouldn't have any other reason. The petition says coyote killing contest. I never found a coyote killing contest anywhere I looked. It was not stated in that manner at all. In talking to these individuals, it was more about benefiting certain species and in that fashion. So I'll be honest, my opinion has not varied off of where I was at in March. I just don't think I can support this petition going forward. Thanks.
Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was reading the support material, you develop opinions and either fine tune them or you adapt them or whatever it is that you're doing. And I sat at home and I made a lot of notes for myself. I don't remember who mentioned who made the comment, but there are so many variables involved that it is really difficult to process all at one time. Bottom line is that I think that the petition that's brought before us today, I've been here long enough to see some really poor petitions that we've accepted. And this one, in my opinion, was very well put together. So I appreciate the effort that went into it. And for a lot of reasons, we can talk about the biology. I think you can probably find concerns or not concerns. In my mind, if there are people that are predator or coyote fans, you could probably make the argument that killing coyotes is real beneficial, because I do believe that it does kick them into gear, and I do believe all the science that says that they respond in a way that to populate themselves. And so I do believe the biology that's been presented. It doesn't make me a fan of contests, trust me. But the things Commissioner Valentine made the comment about the urbanization, urban and versus rural. Human dimension studies tell us that state of Nevada is obviously one of the most urbanized states in the union. I think it's number 3, and with the urbanization of wildlife agents of a state, increases the distrust for wildlife agencies. We're talking about attitudes towards wildlife, and I think Director Wassley has heard this same presentation at WAFWA. So we're already swimming upstream when we're talking about developing a broad-based support for this agency. And I do believe that the potential detriment that the public perception of these contests, I'm not so sure that the public is opposed to removing coyotes. It's how it's done is what is really problematic. And so I think that this just kind of compounds and exacerbates that issue that we're already dealing with as a commission. I do believe that we need to take ownership. There was comment about taking ownership of the issue. By accepting the petition, it doesn't lock us into one thing or another. That's a good place for us to get our authority. We haven't been told that we don't have the legal authority to do it, or that we shouldn't be. LCB has, they have a pretty big say in it. I think that the DAG obviously is going to have a big say in it. We haven't heard from either one. And there's a lot of, I don't believe that there's a major concern for what removing coyotes does for the agricultural aspect. Wildlife Services They're in place to deal with those particular issues. And to be honest with you, over many years, they've come in and justified their actions by being very specific and targeting with their activities. Their reports generally talk about removing offending animals, and so even in with regards to the wildlife services aspect, they talk about removing. So I don't buy the argument that the coyote contests are having an effect agriculture. I guess in some way, I guess there might be if you remove the right coyote at the right time, but. I think that those aspects are covered from a wildlife standpoint. We have the predator management plan. The department brings that cabs can bring potential areas to the table. Those things are considered. So I see those areas as being addressed. The charitable aspects, the money that comes in. I'm not sure that the benefits that are derived from the charities that result are worth the potential damage or the potential impacts that we see as a commission and as an agency, an arm of the agency. We're swimming upstream already, and I don't think now's the time to take on additional challenges. And I do think that we need to play a real active role in this and take ownership of the issue, regardless of where we end up ultimately. That is important to have the dialogue and to fully understand and to fully have that dialogue. So I will be in support of the petition, and that's where I stand at this point. So.
Thank you, Commissioner McNish. Additional commission comment? Commissioner Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is pretty difficult for me because I hear all these comments and I hear what some members of the public are saying. We have a situation where we have two opposing sides, and I don't like to get the feeling that I'm ignoring one side or the other. I try to stay open on how I consider these things, but just my perception of the petition, some things that struck me as I was listening to all this stuff. I agree with the petitioners that the contests, these calling contests, killing contests, wherever you want to call them, do not benefit ranchers. Okay? I also am not really clear in what the petitioners, this is in my mind, what they're asking for. I don't think there's consistency there, because we heard at the beginning of the presentation that it was unprotected mammals that aren't governed by some type of a tag system or quota or some type of limitations. Still, unprotected mammals. Then as we went on, the reasoning was that we needed that broad to prevent contests from coyotes were stopped and it would progress into something else. And so that left questions in my mind. And then as we went even further through the petition, the petitioner finally said, well, we're not talking about rabbits. And so that kind of struck me as that, okay, now are we just talking about specifically coyotes, or are we talking about all these other mammals? So that kind of puts just a little bit of confusion into my mind on the slippery slope deal. It was also brought up that there's more time we need more time to make a decision. And it was also brought up that perhaps educational avenues could be pursued that, in my view, maybe the way to go may not be as stringent as what the regulatory action that could be taken by accepting the petition. So at this time, I think I'm gonna have to go for denying the petition.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Morai. I think that's everyone, isn't there, Commissioner?
I just wanted to say a couple of things. My opinion has not changed from the last time we heard the petition on this. I'm going to stick with the cabs as well. The cabs are the ones that bring this to the public. And one of the big things that sticks out in my mind is the two of the more populated areas, Clark and Washoe. They both do not support this petition, and they're the more urban areas of the state. And there were not a lot, I mean, I think Clark was 6-1 to not support, and then Washoe, I believe, was 2-1. That was the clarification earlier. And I would have to stick with supporting the cabs. I look at this as a cultural issue that many people may not agree with, but there's a lot of people that don't have a problem with it. And we have roughly 26 people here that spoke today in support of the petition that are represented as representing the public in the state of Nevada. And 26 out of the public in the state of Nevada on an issue like this, to me, doesn't overwhelmingly say the public is in complete support of this petition. And that's kind of where I stand on it. I will not support it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Waller. Anyone else or any additional thoughts? Commissioner McNinch?
Yeah, so I'll, Mr. Chairman, as far as, you know, I guess I'm gonna make my pitch that, I'm not seeing a lot of, options or I'm not seeing a lot of better ways to explore the options. Commissioner Morai was, discussing, you know, the educational component. Okay, I guess that there might be some, you know, I think even Dr. Moldy had made the comment that there might be some room to have conversations at that arena. You know, accepting this petition does not lock us in into a particular direction. And I think that it does create the dialogue that's necessary to explore these other options. As far as the cabs, there were at least 25% of the cabs didn't even have a meeting for whatever reason. Probably more like a third, close to a third. There were several that, there were a couple at least that testified today that they operated off of the packet that was given to them, that there were some clarifications made either in subsequent information or here at the meeting today regarding what the intent of the petition is. So I do believe, and I looked at some of the times of some of the other cabs, and I'll be honest with you, we had 3 times as much time spent on public comment today than some of the cabs spent at their whole pre-commission meetings. Most of the cab meetings, there were several that I looked at that lasted roughly 30 minutes, and there were roughly whatever time it took to make a motion and deny the petition. There was no meaningful conversation that occurred, which to me tells me that I think it warrants more than that. I don't think that it was given the time that it needed. For whatever reason, the conversations didn't occur. I'm just not sure that we just don't feel like it's getting a fair shake in that sense, and I think that this commission has the responsibility to give it the fair shake. So I'm gonna.
Okay, additional commission comment?
Chairman Drew, I
Commissioner Hibbs?
would like to reiterate what Commissioner McNinch just stated. I think that we have a duty to at least take a look at it, and it doesn't set us into any certain course of action. It leaves us open to modify, amend, or just take a look at unprotected mammal species, I believe at this time, and that's what's on the table.
Correct, it initiates a regulatory process.
And doesn't set anything in stone, correct?
Right.
And we have a duty to protect and manage wildlife, correct? I just support, again, what Commissioner McNinch reiterated. I don't think there's any harm in taking a look at it.
Additional commission comment? All right, here's where I stand on it. In my opinion, I don't believe the contests are in any way sanctioned or endorsed by this commission or the department. I appreciate everyone coming today. I think the discussion was much more civil and much more productive for me. I appreciate the petitioners taking the time to clarify their petition and put together what I feel is a much better package than the last one we received. I struggle with launching into a regulatory process simply because in all the time that the petitioners had to put the petition together, there's still a lot of questions in terms of what exactly we're trying to regulate. And I think the problem with that is that we're trying to use a regulation to bridge a social divide, and I'm not sure you can do that. I think in some ways launching into a regulatory process could actually make this more difficult going forward. If I believed denying the petition was going to completely discontinue all dialogue and discussion, I would support accepting it. But I don't think a regulatory course of action at this time makes sense given all the variables and all the things that are at play here. There's a lot of things that go on that I'm not supportive of, whether that's in hunting communities, fishing communities, or the community in general. But I don't know that regulation is always the answer, and in this one, I'm struggling across 2 meetings now finding the regulatory common ground, and maybe we need to walk before we can crawl, but I'm just not seeing it right now. And that's where I'm at. Commissioner McNair.
Chairman Drew. So I guess for me, for lack of options, I'm on accepting a petition to start that process. And I mean, I'm reading the writing on the wall, but I'm asking, what's the alternate process for having the conversation? What's the alternate process? I mean, we've been through the committee things with other things. We know how painful that can be for everybody, not for the public in general. I mean, we heard it today.
So my first recommendation was going to have you chair a committee, but apparently.
I'm thinking because I'm a sucker. But, I can tell you that when the whole bear thing came along, I sat in a room with Elaine and Lloyd. I don't know if Kathy was there. Catherine was there. Elaine had us up at her house long enough for me to just tell them that the one thing that they would always get from me is I would always advocate for an open process, for transparent process, for the conversation. And to date, regardless of the results, I think I've come through on that, and I've been true to my word on that side of things. And I'm still there. It's important, regardless of what we come up with, having that conversation, because for me, the broader issue is how this agency moves into the future. We can talk about the cultural, and we can talk about urban versus rural. I think we recognize all those things, but the bottom line is that this agency is going to have to adapt, just like every other agency in the country, to the new attitudes on wildlife. And we're not, in my opinion, always putting ourselves in a position to do that. And I think this is a real critical time for me to hear this conversation. To me, this is one of the most important times in this agency's history or lifespan, if you will. And I just can't help but feel that if we don't find a way to have these conversations and engage the public in a way that they maintain or develop or gain trust, whatever the case might be, this agency is going to be in trouble. And to me, that means wildlife in the state of Nevada is in trouble, and I'm not okay with that. So I'm open to whatever. If you want to do a committee, I'm game for it. You know that. And I'll be glad to participate in whatever manner.
I can't believe you just volunteered for that.
I didn't volunteer. I feel more voluntold, but that's okay.
In my opinion, like I said, I think the regulatory process is going to be cumbersome. I don't know that it's been the most efficient based on recent past experience. in my opinion, to be blunt and honest, I think maybe a policy discussion might be more fruitful. One approach, that's where I'm at. But I think that going down the regulatory route with as polarized as this matter is, and without the petitioners even being able to describe what exactly they want regulated, and how that ultimately resolves the crux of their concern, in my mind, it just doesn't seem like the right tool for the job.
Well, and as we speak, I'm gonna throw this out to the people that have been in support of this petition. I'm still gonna vote in support of the petition, but having said that, I don't think we have to look very far to recognize that our regulatory efforts in the past have not gone very far without major support from LCB, the Legislative Commission in particular. And so, you know, I do understand where that could be ineffective and where it might not get to where there's a little common ground or there's some tolerance or whatever the case might be. So I'll be voting in support of the petition today. I do appreciate that pathway has not been as successful as we want it to be in the past. So even when we've had all the commission on board.
Further discussion?
I just wanted to get into the procedural aspects of the petition and just to note that I felt that it met all of the procedural guidelines today. And again, we're not making any hard and fast decisions. And although ambiguous and apparently a little too broad for some of our appetite in this room, I think that it's worthwhile to take a look at it. And if we always shied away from looking at our petitions because it might mean there is work to do, then we really won't be getting anything done. Regulatory process will be time consuming, but if our general public doesn't feel like they have an ear at the commission too, they may take their matters elsewhere, and sometimes those alternative routes are even less productive.
Okay, further discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I don't
McNinch.
usually do this way when I feel the temperature in the room, but I will make a motion recognizing that the petition met the criteria for a legitimate petition that's been brought before us, and that we support the general concept of at least having the conversation about regulating these contests as outlined in the petition.
I second that motion.
Motion by Commissioner McNinch and a second by Commissioner Hubbs to approve the petition. I know there was a lot more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it. I think the bottom line is that the petition, I feel like it met the criteria that necessary to be brought before us, and that that we've had in public input, and we've had our deliberation, and I feel that it's worth having the conversation on whether we establish some regulatory boundaries or not.
Okay, discussion on the motion or questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'm not going to support the motion, and simply because I don't think the regulatory process is going to get us where we need to be. And I also don't believe that denying the petition is going to close the dialogue. And I guess I'm asking Commissioner McNinch for a little bit of trust in your chair in moving forward. In making that statement. But again, it's no slight to the people who put the petition together, to the people who spoke in favor of the petition, or to the people who spoke in opposition to the petition. I've talked to a lot of people about the meeting today, and they look at the agenda and say, well, that's a pretty light agenda, this should be easy. And then I start describing to them the discussion that was going to occur today. And then their kind of initial reaction is, well, that should be an easy decision. And I explain more of what we've discussed in the past to them. And by the end of the conversation, they say, I'm sure glad I'm not in your shoes. Not very comforting. But that's where I stand. I'm being as open and honest as I can at this point. This is not an easy decision. And I really appreciate how much more constructive and honest and real this discussion was than the discussion in March, because I think we've gotten a lot further down the road. So, any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye. So we are 2 in support and 5 opposed. So do we procedurally, do we need a motion to deny the petition? Or is it implied that with that motion failure, the petition has not been accepted?
May it please the board, Mr. Commissioner? No, I think that is sufficient under the open meeting laws. You had brought an issue before the board and you voted on it, but also for the record, just the other 2 commissioners aren't on. I know you did say 2 to 5, but just to make that clear on.
Yes, just to clarify, we do have Commissioners Young and Johnston absent from the vote.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to the DAG, I can't remember ever having a petition to where we didn't either accept or deny by vote. So with that in mind, I think it would be prudent that we, if there's going to be a denial, or if this petition is not moving forward, that there be a formal recognition of that or a formal vote by this commission. I think that would be responsible of us.
I'm comfortable with the belt and suspenders approach. So with that, I would entertain a second motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make an attempt at a motion here. I'll also make a little statement. I think compared to where we were in March and where we are today, that there's been quite a bit of talk and media coverage and social coverage, et cetera. And I think the word is getting out that perhaps the ethics of comedy calling contests is not a positive issue, but I still have to move forward with the denial on the petition, and I'll make a motion that we deny the petition by Mr. Mulvey, Sturgis, Volz, and Howard, dated October 9, 2015.
Is there a second?
Second.
So I've got a motion from Commissioner Valentine with a second by Commissioner Moore to deny the petition. Are there any questions or discussion? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other thing that I'd just like to say about it is that going down the regulatory process, like it's happened 2 or 3 different times during my term on the commission, is that we've started down the road with the regulation. And once we got pointed that direction, we ended up not where we wanted to be. And this is an issue, I know that the person shouldn't run scared, but this is an issue that I feel that's where we could end up. So that kind of just furthers my support for denial of petition.
Further discussion or question on the motion? Commissioner Lynch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just one final comment. You know, this commission in the past has had rockier times. There's no doubt. I think some of you remember some of those days. But my vote here, I won't be supporting the motion. I've said that many times. But we still maintain respect for each other up here, and I hope that we've acted in a civil manner for an awfully long time here. We've had our ups and downs and bumps here and there, but I hope that everybody can have a civil disagreement about these issues and be able to walk out of here and let this issue stand on its own. You know, there's a lot of things that people in this room have in commonality. Your care for wildlife, regardless of your perspective or your culture or whatever it might be, is legitimate. I don't care what side of the coin you're on, and have a little respect for each other and come to each other's side on the common things. Don't just alienate each other because the perception is anti, or the perception is, that we disagree in one particular area, one emotional area. There's a lot of places where everybody has agreement in here, And it's important. It's important that everybody stand by the side in areas where you don't have disagreement. I'm gonna have disagreement with some of my commissioners here. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna abandon everything that we do in here because of that one disagreement on an issue. So, I think now's a good time to point that out and walk out of this room having disagreement about one particular issue and leave your mind open to those other things that might come to the table that you have common concern for or commonalities on.
Appreciate the comments, Commissioner McNinch. Additional comments or question on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 5-2 with McNinch and Hubbs, the dissenting votes, and Johnston and Young absent. Okay, with that, one more thank you to everyone involved in the discussions and the presentation today. I'm going to close agenda item 6.